This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm your host, Matt Addison, with Gorst and Theo Squires alongside me as we look ahead to the huge fixture at Anfield this weekend against Manchester City and take a quick look back at that incredibly impressive Champions League victory over Porto midweek. We'll start with that win in Portugal, which puts Liverpool in a very handy position in Group B, Gorsty, after two games have been played. But I think there's only one place that we can start. That is the performance of Curtis Jones. Is it a coming-of-age performance for him, do you think? Or is that maybe doing a disservice to some of the performances he's already put in for Liverpool?
A bit of both, I think. He was superb, wasn't he, on the night, particularly second half. The thing that I liked most about it, which kind of summed up his entire night's work, was Liverpool's second goal, where I think it might be Alisson with the goal kick. Long goal kick, and Jones races over to pretty much the halfway line, and 9 out of 10 players probably wouldn't have the touch to keep the ball in play, and he manages to get the ball down the line first time, keep it in play, Liverpool go up the other end and score just before half time, and the game is pretty much done and dusted there and then from Mane's tap in, and he had a hand in pretty much every goal, didn't he? Obviously set Firmino away for the fourth, was it? And then the fifth, it was his shot. His shot to set Salah up, the keeper pounded into Salah's path. So he's had a big hand in all the goals, and he's just pretty much ran the show from midfield. So I can see what you mean in terms of coming of age performance, but I do think that might do a little bit of a disservice to other performances as well. Everton in the cup, and he was one of the he obviously got the winner, but he was almost a bit of a leader in a pretty young team. I think he might have had Lalande and Milner for company, the experienced pros, but he kind of took that game by the scruff of the neck, and he was obviously captain for the night when they beat Shrewsbury, and he was the most experienced player out there that night. So he's had plenty of big moments already in his young Liverpool career. Look back at the winning goal against Ajax last year in the Champions League, and Klopp seems to be keen to get this message out that it's all about consistency now with him. He keeps challenging him, go and do it again, more of the same, can you do it again? And hopefully that message sinks in, and we start to see those kind of performances on a regular basis, because I think now, looking at it, he's certainly ahead of Keita in the pecking order, and Oxlade-Chamberlain. Maybe not Thiago yet, and if Thiago is fit after the international break, then could be something for Klopp to look at further in terms of the selection. But I think he's absolutely played his way into that midfield on Sunday, yeah.
I think we saw a little bit, Theo, of why I quite like him on the left-hand side of a front three. He sort of took up those positions quite frequently against Porto. But I suppose if he can do that and also do the defensive work, not that there was a great deal of that to do on Tuesday night, but you see what I mean in terms of playing in that midfield position and doing that and doing all of the other bits. That's exactly what Jurgen Klopp wants from him, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one where you look at him and he's got a bit of everything, doesn't he? Like, you don't want to compare him to any big legends or anything like that, but we've seen him play a number of roles already in his young career, and he's shown so many attributes, and it's one where perhaps Liverpool are lacking that sort of midfielder that gets forward and can be involved in the play so much, but he's always an exciting player, and it was one where we were hyping him up so much when he was standing out for Liverpool, probably middle of last season, and he was unfortunate to lose his place at the business end of the season when Klopp went for experience to get into the race to the top four. And you think you start this season, and it felt like he was almost bottom of the midfield pecking order. And I'm sure it would have been a bit harsh on him as well when you think Harvey Elliott's come in and he was the new darling, the new star that everyone was getting excited about. And it's one where Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott, if you had them in a midfield in a few years' time, either side of Fabinho, how exciting is that going to be? Like, granted, it might not be a trio you can play against a Manchester City, but the fact that both of them on the ball, they can get forward, they can get stuck into challenges, they can pick passes, they can offer goals. It's just, Liverpool have got another one, haven't they? Curtis Jones is such a great talent, and as Gorsty said, it's all about consistency now. But he was one of the best performers against Brentford. He was the best performer against Porto. Could this be the start of him taking that next step? And it's what you want to see from him. It's what Liverpool need at that time. Like, we've always had that debate for a good few months now. Do Liverpool need a replacement for Gini Wijnaldum? Well, if Harvey Elliott can come back from injury and reach the form he did before the injury, and Curtis Jones can find that consistency, no, they do not, because they've got two very talented young players here that could easily be part of a Liverpool midfield for, the next 5-10 years.
He wasn't the only one to stand out, Gorsty. There was a few good performances. 2 more goals for Mohamed Salah, which I think takes him one behind Steven Gerrard in the all-time Liverpool Champions League goals list. It's another game, another reminder, just another week where I'm asking a very similar question, really, as if we needed another reminder of how good Mohamed Salah is. He's edging closer to another Liverpool legend.
Yeah, just records left and right, isn't it, where Mo Salah's concerned. And I was writing a piece about him this week, actually, and it was almost fitting for all these records that he's taken and he's broken at Liverpool. He was a record breaker before he even joined, wasn't he? When you think back to Liverpool paid the fee to break the record that was held by Andy Carroll at the time. So he pretty much started his Liverpool career as he's carried on. And every game now you're talking about a new record. You mentioned Steven Gerrard there. He'll take that, won't he? He wouldn't be surprised if he's taken that before the end of the group stages, to be honest. And I'm looking at him now and I'm thinking, since the start of the season, is he the best player in Europe at the moment? 8 goals in 8 games, 3 in the Champions League, 5 in the Premier League. Liverpool are top of both groups. He's the main man. Obviously, Lionel Messi is, I think we might all agree on this, that he's probably the greatest player that we've ever seen. But, judging from form at the start of the season, for me, Salah seems to be head and shoulders above pretty much everyone in Europe. So we're just privileged that we get to watch him, aren't we? So, yeah, more of the same on Sunday for Mo, and Liverpool can ride off into the international break with a massive result.
I was really impressed with James Milner at right back as well, Theo. I thought it was another pretty good impression of Trent Alexander-Arnold from him. And we'll speak a little bit more a bit later on in terms of the Manchester City game and what that means. But just in terms of that Porto performance, it was another really good showing from a 35-year-old that looks about 25.
Yeah, James Milner never lets you down, does he? And it's one where I think last couple of seasons where he's not played as much as he would have liked, he's picked up these little niggles and got injuries, and you think, maybe he's starting to slow down, maybe age is catching up on him, his contract's up next summer. But then this is just the perfect response to it. He's gone out and he's put in a couple of great performances, and you think, he's definitely still got so much to give to Liverpool. In the past, you'd say, maybe you just see if he wants to become a part of the coaching staff, because we know how much he does behind the scenes. We know how much he offers to the younger players, but he still has so much to give on the pitch. And one of my best bits about the Porto game wasn't it another assist, wasn't it, for the second goal? And the list of players he's got more Champions League assists than, because it helped mainly by that amazing season he had when they reached the final, when he seemed to be setting up a goal every single game. But he's one of those players that steps up for the big occasions, and you'd have no doubt about him playing against Manchester City at the weekend. He always seems to rise his game against them anyway, because it's his former club. But yeah, it's just great to see him getting, do we call it yet another Indian summer? Because he seems to be doing this every so often. But long may it continue, because if he's doing this at 35, and we know he's one of the fittest players at the squad anyway, we could be talking about him still going strong. Maybe not at Liverpool, but in the Premier League when he's pushing 40.
Yeah, still plenty to come from him, and sort of ties in with the next point, really, Gorsty, in that Jurgen Klopp spoke after Porto about wanting his defence to put right the mistakes that they made against Brentford. And I suppose in that regard, they didn't have a huge amount of defending to do, but it was important to put in that performance ahead of City, because obviously we know how important momentum is, particularly for this Liverpool team.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you look at it and you think Porto were really, really poor on the night, but I think Liverpool made them look poor, to be honest. This is a team that were unbeaten in 18 before Tuesday night, and Liverpool's unbeaten record stretches back to March, and I think that is only 17 games now. So they've been in great form for a good while, really, haven't they? I think that the last defeat was when Chelsea knocked them out in the first leg. I think Porto might have won the second leg of that, possibly 1-0. So they're a good team, and they were at home, and Liverpool didn't give them an inch, did they? Obviously, we can talk a little bit about a bit of a hapless goalkeeping performance from Diogo Costa, who I think he threw in about 3 of them. But Liverpool just absolutely ruthless, put the foot on the necks when it was time to do it. And it was a bit of a throwback performance to 17-18 when Liverpool just had that little burst to take the game away from teams, and that was what we saw in the second half. Their goal didn't flatter them at all, did it? And then as the game was wearing on, they really have turned it up and scored the 4th and the 5th. So it was good to see that kind of desire and just willingness not to take the foot off the gas. They really, Klopp made the 5 changes, but didn't really disrupt the performance. They just carried on, and in the end, they've absolutely hammered the team who were in massively good form. So full credit to them, because that was a big statement performance on Tuesday night.
Yeah, 6 points from 6 now in the Champions League, 5 more points than Porto in 3rd place. Liverpool don't tend to do things the easy way, and there are back-to-back games now against Atletico Madrid to come through, Theo, but they couldn't really be in a better place, and it would be a big boost if they could get through to the knockout phase without having to play a strong team for all 6 of those group games.
Yeah, that's always a benefit if you can get it done early. With Liverpool, I suppose we've almost forgotten how good they are because of the pandemic, playing behind closed doors. And you can go back to when they were playing Atletico last a couple of years ago, when they weren't able to play to their best of their abilities. And you looked at this group, and on paper it is really tough. There are big names in there, and all of them away days are going to be tough, horrible games. But when Liverpool are on form, showing what they can do, they can beat anyone. Not just they're a match for anyone, they can beat anyone. That's why they were the European champions. That's why they're the Premier League champions. It's like, well, if they're in this form, Atletico Madrid away doesn't look as intimidating as it would have done when the draw was made. They've not had the best start to it either. They had to get, a last-minute winner against Milan, and that was playing against 10 men for what must have been something like an hour. So it's like Liverpool very much team in form in this group, and it's one where if you're still unbeaten after 4 games, you say, well, Liverpool are through there. And it's not even a case of having to go proper weak for games here, because they've got so many strong players in reserve who can come in and take their opportunities. Like, it was a surprise to see Origi start against AC Milan, but he did really well there. Obviously, with you being able to make 5 substitutions, we're given a glimpse of Oxlade-Chamberlain, Minamino in midweek. So, well, the players there, they've got a chance to stake their claim, and European football's probably the best place for them to do it. So you just want Liverpool to get the results done and put those ghosts from Atletico Madrid a couple of years ago behind them and say, yep, we are one of the teams that can win this, because you can current form. We're talking about Salah's the best player in Europe on form at the moment. Well, Liverpool must be one of the best teams in Europe on form at the moment, because Barcelona, Real Madrid, they're not what they were. You're looking at what PSG and Bayern Munich as maybe the favourites for Champions League, Man City as well. Well, Liverpool right up there in that conversation from what we've seen so far.
Yeah, one big game to come after another for Liverpool. So we will move on to Manchester City very shortly. But just before we do that, I wanted to mention the passing of Roger Hunt earlier in the week, Liverpool's record league goal scorer. None of us are anywhere near old enough, Gorsty, to remember him playing, but he's a name that people will know and will have come across plenty of times. I'm sure there'll be a remembrance at Anfield on Sunday, and he is a true Liverpool legend. Yeah,
undoubtedly. You look at the names who've played for Liverpool Football Club over the 130 years of history or whatever it is, and there's so many great names, isn't there? Ian Rush, Kenny Dalglish, Robbie Fowler, Kevin Keegan. You can go on, you can name them all, and Sir Roger Hunt, as he was known by the Kop, is right up there alongside any of them, isn't he? He's actually only second to Ian Rush in the number of goals, and he's got the record for most league goals, I think 246 possibly. Obviously before our time, but one of the main men when Liverpool were kind of in the Shankly Revolution, starting to become a force. And it's just very sad, isn't it? It's been quite a sad time for the club, really, across the last 18 months, 2 years, when you think of the likes of Ray Clements and Gerard Houllier, Ian St. John, and now Roger Hunt. Some of these great names of the past leaving us, but some great memories, I'm sure. And obviously, as we say, we're all too young to remember him at his best. But Theo, you had a chance to speak to him, didn't you? Probably one of his final ever interviews, actually, at the beginning of last year. And one of the things that keeps coming back when you hear people talk about Roger Hunt was how much of a gentleman he was, and that seems to be a common theme, and I'm sure it's something that you could vouch for as well.
Yeah, with Roger, it's one where he's not been well for a number of years, and he had already basically retired from these public appearances. And so I was really lucky that I was able to go and do this interview, and it wasn't lost on me at all. Like, you think this would have been December, January, like round before the pandemic, when it was starting across the globe. So if this had been 2 months later, I wouldn't have got the chance to meet Roger Hunt. But obviously, we know my Bolton past. Roger Hunt's a Bolton Wanderers fan. He idolised Nat Lofthouse. So you got my Liverpool links, and you know how much a legend he is there. And then I spent 4 years at Bolton Wanderers, and that's a real family club. And they're talking about legends here and how they idolised Roger Hunt as well. And I think I've met him once at a Bolton game, and he was such a gent there. Came on and did the lotteries draw on the pitch. He's posing for pictures for everyone. He's just part of the family there, and that's how I was made to feel when I went and did this interview. Like, it was just before Christmas time. They're getting Christmas cards in, the chocolates are all out, the decorations are up, and I just felt like I was a grandkid going to see my grandparents. Him and his wife Rowan made me feel so welcome, and it wasn't one where you just ask him questions like you would a normal interview. It's just dictaphone on and just having a conversation, and I must have been there for a good hour and a half. Getting what I needed for this piece. And then they took me upstairs to look at his study, where he had a picture on the wall. I think that the Echo had gifted him for his testimonial. There was a picture from the 66 World Cup, and that was one of his favourites because the scoreboard, it was a manual one. And I think England had gone 2-1 up in the final, but the guy changing the scoreboard, it still said 1-1 because he was celebrating. I think it was Martin Peters scoring the goal. And you got all these pictures of the famous faces like Ian Rush. I think there'd have been like Sir Alex Ferguson, all this, like all these people that Roger Hunt has met, because it's not just a Liverpool legend football's lost, it's an England legend too, and it is one of the all-time greats. You think of the few players that have won the World Cup, English players that have won the World Cup, and he was right there. Like, we lost Jimmy Greaves only a couple of weeks ago, and the talk of that was how he was unfortunate not to start in that World Cup final because Jeff Hurst had come in. But even though we don't remember him, it's not a case of, oh, Roger Hunt was lucky to keep his place. Like, Jeff Hurst came in and he took the headlines with the hat-trick and scoring in the earlier rounds. But Roger played such a huge role in the group stages as well. And it's just, I could have listened to him all day just talking about the likes of Bill Shankly winning the World Cup. And just even when he was talking about current football, when he's like talking about how Jamie Vardy is one of his favourite players. Granted, I'm sure he would have had plenty more to tell when he was in better health, but it was such an honour to get that time with him. And then I think when we published the interview and it went in the paper, they invited me back again a few weeks later to give them the paper so they had the copy themselves. And again, I was sat there for another hour just chatting with them, having a catch up like I was one of the family. Such a shame to lose any of these legends, but Roger was a gent. The fact that it's Sir Roger and he never wanted a knighted himself, you know how much he's loved by Liverpool fans. And the fact that we're having this conversation about him now, when what he was doing for the club, we're talking 60 odd years ago, none of us have seen him play, and we still know how important he is to the club. It shows what a gent he was, and he will be sadly missed, and glad that Anfield can honour him properly on Sunday, and hopefully it can be with a fitting win against title rivals.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be an emotional occasion. The sad passing of Roger Hunt, a true Liverpool legend. We will move on to Manchester City now, Gorsty. We did hear from Jurgen Klopp a little bit earlier in the day. There wasn't a great deal in there that we didn't know about. There's obviously no illusions from the Liverpool side of things as to how big a challenge Manchester City will be. But Jurgen Klopp seemingly quite confident that if Liverpool play well, Liverpool can win this one.
Yeah, very much so. I think there was a couple of things that give the game away a little bit on Tuesday. He spoke to BT Sport and he said, looking forward to Sunday with the fans back in. And then he said it again in the press conference that we were in. And it just made me think, I think we were a little bit stung by what happened in February. Obviously losing that game 4-1, quite a heavy defeat, wasn't it? No fans in there to help. It was at a time when Liverpool were injury hit, they were confidence drained, and it was right slap bang in the middle of that 6-game, losing streak. So I think they know that this weekend they've got a chance to put that right, and they're going to need the fans in there to play the part. And I think they've proven before that when the fans are up for it, and Anfield, all the cliches that you like to use with Anfield, that it massively affects Manchester City. I think they've proven that time and again. I think Liverpool have won 5 of the 7 games that they played there, Klopp v Guardiola, and the only one they've lost was that one, as I say, in February when there was no fans there. So it's not a myth. It's not just something that gets brought up. It's very tangible, and you can see that in the results. And I think Klopp can't wait for this game again with the kind of bells and whistles of the supporters and whatever else. And it's going to be another fascinating contest. And if Liverpool come flying out the blocks, then I think they can come away with a massive scalp in the title race.
It was put to me earlier on, Theo, by a Manchester City fan that Klopp's only actually won 1 of the last 7 against Pep Guardiola. But I did a little bit of research into that. That does include the Community Shield, which I'm not quite sure whether that's a proper game or not. It includes the game a couple of days after Liverpool had begun their Premier League title celebrations. And, of course, it includes both matches of last season where there were no fans. So probably a little bit more even than that record suggests, but it does sort of underline the task that Liverpool have got this weekend.
Yeah, I'm writing a piece on it actually just before we started recording this podcast, that it's not been a particularly kind fixture to Liverpool in recent memory, and you can include missing out on the league title by 11 millimetres at the Etihad as well into that. But this will be the first proper Liverpool-Man City game since the Fabinho screener and that 3-1, which basically made Liverpool champions elect, even though it was only like October at the time. And Liverpool sent out that massive statement. We know how big the rivalry is between Liverpool and Man City and how much respect's there between the two parties. But we've almost been robbed of seeing them properly go at it head to head, haven't we? Like, you think we had the 1 year where there was 1 point in it. They both went for it. It was great to see. When they just went half a season unbeaten, neither of them blinked, and City ended up winning the league. But then when Liverpool won the league, City were miles off it. When City won the league last year, Liverpool were miles off it. You just want that return to a proper rivalry, proper football. And that's what we should hopefully get this weekend. But fans are back there. It's going to be that really heated, passionate atmosphere. It's going to feel almost like a European game, isn't it? You think, if Raheem Sterling starts, we know there's going to be that added spice there. And it's going to be a case of Liverpool have a point to prove, because they'll be hurting that they didn't win the title last year. And granted, it was for reasons that were out of their control. But they've not had a chance to prove that this is a great team. They've shown that they can win a Champions League and a Premier League, but they've not been able to build on that because of the pandemic. And then it's become this situation now where players are starting to leave or starting to age. And it's like, well, how much can this current team achieve? If they can beat Man City and do it in what we've seen before, like the 3-1 victory when they went on to win the league, it shows they are very much this great side, and it'd be such a blow to Man City because we've already seen Pep being a little bit rattled so far this season. They've dropped a couple of silly points. Granted, Liverpool did against Brentford last weekend, but it's one where you want Liverpool to go out and show, right, yes, let's put a line under everything that's happened in the past 18 months and pick up exactly where they left off from winning that Premier League title. Because as we're talking about these players, like, it doesn't matter whether it's a reserve right back in James Milner against his former club or Mohamed Salah, they've all got a point to prove, and they all want to show that they're the very best. And when time comes for them to hang up their boots, it's not 1 Premier League title and 1 Champions League title to their names, it's 3 and 4.
Yeah, fans will make a huge difference, Gorsty, in this one. And it's going to be a very different game to what we saw at Anfield last season as well, in that the centre-backs are going to be very different for Liverpool. It's a very different Alisson Becker in goal. What are you expecting from the game, though? Are you expecting it to be tight and cagey, or might we see another of those 4-3 big battles, loads of goals?
Tough on that, isn't it? I didn't actually see Chelsea against Manchester City last week because of travelling to Brentford. I've only seen the highlights. But that was an impressive performance from City, I believe. Chelsea, though, Liverpool aren't going to have that same game plan, are they? Liverpool are never going to, especially at home, they're never going to be content to come out and be a bit cagey and keep men behind the ball and look to break where they can. I think Liverpool are going to come out and they're going to try and go full throttle. And the question is, can Man City kind of withstand the heat? So I think that is pretty much the big question of Sunday. Because I don't think there's going to be any kind of secrecy about how Liverpool are going to approach it. Obviously, Trent is a massive blow, but I still think Liverpool are going to come out and they're going to have the crowd on their side, and they're going to try and flick the switch. And we seen it in 2019, didn't we, when Liverpool raced into a 3-0 lead, 2-0 up at half time. I think they will try and repeat something like that, and then it's whether City have got the fortitude to stand up to it, and that for me I think is the big question, because City are fine when the going's on their side and they can kind of beat teams into submission, and if they get an early goal and a second early goal, that's normally a comfortable day at the office for them, isn't it? But when things tend to go against them and what bit of luck isn't on their side, they never really seem to pull one out the fire, do they? You look at when they were drawing with Southampton a couple of weeks ago, with about 25 minutes to go, 20 minutes to go, you just knew they weren't going to get a late winner. It's not really in their makeup, is it? They either win comfortably 3 or 4 or even 5, as they've done a couple of times already this season, or they struggle to nick a late winner. So it's going to be fascinating, and it's the Chelsea game was great, wasn't it? In terms of atmosphere, and that felt like a big occasion. But I think this one's going to feel even bigger, to be honest.
Jurgen Klopp referenced before just how good City were against Chelsea, Theo. And when Chelsea came to Anfield, I was really impressed with how they played, to be honest. So what do you make of the sort of title battle so far? There was a kind of narrative to begin with that Chelsea might be the favourites, then maybe last weekend changed that. Maybe this weekend could change that again. What do you make of what you've seen so far?
I think it's still far too early to call, just because any of the big three, Liverpool, City and Chelsea, could win this title. Like, on their day, all of them can beat any of the others. They can beat anyone in the league, anyone in Europe. They are such strong sides, and they've got strengths all across the pitch. Lukaku was a game-changing transfer, I think, for Chelsea. It gives them that big goal scorer that can get them any goals and win them games. Like, they can still sit deep, defend, and you know how good they are defensively. I think I said it on podcasts before. The only thing you wonder about them is when will the attacking midfielders step up to that next level. That's not saying that Pulisic or Mason Mount or Kai Havertz are bad players. They're really good players, but they're not at Mohamed Salah's level. They're not at Sadio Mane's level. And it's like when those players behind Lukaku can get to that level, that's when Chelsea are real contenders. And then with City, it's one where they always find a way to win. They always find a way to do it, but they still look like they're lacking that striker. It was all very well spending 100 million on Jack Grealish, and I know he's been pretty much ever present so far this season. But when you look at the players they're leaving out for him, it's like you didn't necessarily need him. Like, you've still got Sterling, you've still got Bernardo Silva, you've still got Riyad Mahrez. They've got so many good options. Phil Foden's now back from injury. If they had gone out and got the striker, if they'd managed to get a Lukaku, for example, you'd say, well, that's them as favourites. And then you look at Liverpool, it's like, well, we know their starting 11 is one of the best, if not the best, in the Premier League. The only question was depth. And then this year, looking at it, they've got the depth. The only reason you've had doubts about it in the past is because the depth has been taken away through injuries. Yeah, they've had a couple of knocks so far, but they're looking solid. They're looking on form. They're looking confident. It's just about getting these points in these big games. Chelsea still feels like a missed opportunity when Liverpool are playing against 10 men. If they'd managed to get a victory in that game, we'd be talking about them 3 points clear. And if they could beat City, that's 6 points clear of City going into a national break. They can't lose the same opportunity against City now, because if City can get this win at Anfield, that is a massive statement. And you say, oh, if they can win at Anfield, against Anfield when it's the fans back, they can win anywhere. And you'd say they're favourites, having got that victory against Chelsea away last week. But then Liverpool, well, if they get the win, they're the ones in the driving seat. They're the ones with the advantage at the top of the table. We know how important that was for them 2 years ago. But it is still wide open. We're talking about this in October now, and there are many twists and turns left to go. And it's one where I think even Guardiola in his press conference today said, you're not counting United anymore. Granted, they've had a few sticky weeks, but never write off a side with the likes of Bruno Fernandes and Cristiano Ronaldo. And you never know, they might have a new manager, and a new manager bounce within a couple of months as well.
Yeah, that could certainly be an interesting one. It's been a big week for City, Gorsty, in terms of Chelsea last weekend, PSG midweek, and then Liverpool. It may not prove to be the case, but there is a bit of a question mark in my head for maybe the last 20 minutes on Sunday. There might be something of a bit of fatigue maybe for Liverpool to get at? I know they've got a big squad, but weeks don't get much bigger than Chelsea, PSG, and then a trip to Anfield.
No, they don't, do they? And I was thinking this could be a bit of a make or break week for City, and then they beat Chelsea, and you think, okay, really good result for them, kind of brings them back into the four. Because I think if they'd have lost that, obviously they're still in the title race, but just would have made things a whole lot more difficult coming to Liverpool, where they traditionally haven't got a good record. Then they get beat by PSG, and you're thinking, okay, mixed bag so far. So will they consider it a good week or a bad week at 6 o'clock on Sunday afternoon? That's the big question for City, isn't it? I can see your point about the fatigue possibly setting in, because none of those games have they been able to rest legs and take it easy and whatever else. You can obviously make the 5 subs in the Champions League. I'm not too sure if they did or not the other night, but they were well in that game against PSG from what I've seen. Obviously, just a bit of genius from the little fella Messi, turned the PSG's way after the early goal from Idrissa Gueye. But it wasn't a game where they were comfortable losers. They were well in that game, and if they put in a similar performance at Anfield on Sunday, Liverpool obviously going to have the hands full. So we're expecting that anyway. But I think the fatigue issue could be a factor, because Liverpool obviously had the game won after 50 minutes, didn't they? 55 minutes on Tuesday. So two very contrasting results coming into this one on Sunday, and I can't wait for it. It's going to be one of those games where you're reminded of why you do this job, why you watch football, why you love football. Because I think for far too long we haven't really been able to do that too often, have we? With the behind closed door model and the shambles of pretty much everything last season, from the injuries to the VAR to the no fans. So this will be a timely reminder for why we all watch the game, and then we're off for 2 weeks for the international break.
Yes, an untimely international break, certainly. It was only the 2 subs that City made midweek against PSG, but they were in that game by all accounts. I think they outshot PSG by about 3-4 times. So obviously a decent performance from them, but we'll see how it pans out at Anfield. Just before we finish, we will pick our teams for the game. We know that Alisson Becker will be in goal. I'm going to presume, Gorsty, that James Milner will be at right back. Is there an argument for anybody else there, do you think? And how else would you line up with the rest of that back four?
No, I don't think so. Nico Williams is back in training, isn't he? Joe Gomez came on for Milner and right back, but I'd be a little bit worried if either of those were starting on Sunday. I think Klopp was very reluctant not to give that one away straight away and let Guardiola have that one. Milner starting, but you'd be hard pushed to think that Klopp's going to spring a surprise with a Nico Williams or a Joe Gomez, wouldn't you? Given that Milner's performed so well so far against Zaha and Diaz, so Milner starting at right back.
And the rest of your back four, does that pick itself, do you think, in terms of Matip, Van Dijk and Robertson?
Yeah, I think so. It's great that Liverpool have got options now, isn't it? If you were to say, for example, that you're going to bring Gomez in for Matip, you wouldn't really blink. If you were to say that Tsimikas can come in for Robertson, okay, you might still think Robertson is the main man there, and he is, but Tsimikas has proven this season that he can do a passable impression. So, it's nice just to have those options, but I do still think it will be an unchanged back five on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, nice little bit of momentum to lead into that. I thought Robertson was pretty good, actually, midweek. Theo, are you in agreement with the back four?
Yeah, I think so. It'd be very harsh to take James Milner out of this team. And it's one where maybe 2-3 years ago, it was the sort of game where Klopp would put Joe Gomez at right back. But that was when Liverpool were challengers. Now they're more than challengers. Now they've got those trophies to their name. Now they've got that faith. They're not trying to catch up with Manchester City. You can have faith in what you're doing without having to go a slightly more defensive. And James Milner, like I said earlier, always wants a proof point against Man City. So I think he keeps that spot. There's that slight doubt of Van Dijk and Matip playing 3 games in a week. But Matip has got an international break off at the end of it. And Van Dijk is going to get back to full steam at some point. Maybe this will be that sign that those cobwebs are definitely off. And now Virgil van Dijk is fully back. And Robertson, we know what he's capable of. He's not had as good a start to the season as he'd have liked, but it was more promising from him in midweek. So I'd go along with the same back four. As Gorsty said, you wouldn't have any fears if it was Tsimikas or if it was Gomez at centre-back or anything like this. But stick with the tried and trusted. They might have shipped 3 against Brentford, but you can't see them having as bad an off day against Man City as they did against Brentford. Even if they still ship 3, that would just be a quality on show, won't it? A sign of the good game.
In terms of the midfield, then, Jurgen Klopp did suggest a possible formation change earlier on. I'm not quite sure how likely that might be, but I'm going to go with Curtis Jones in there with Fabinho and Jordan Henderson. And to be honest, I'd be surprised, Gorsty, if that wasn't what Klopp went with ultimately.
Yeah, I think so. He was teasing a bit of a formation switch, wasn't he? And if you think back to that game of the Etihad in November last year, he went 4-2-3-1, didn't he? And played all 4 of his main attackers, which I think would have caught Guardiola off guard quite a lot. And Liverpool started well that day. They had a few chances. Obviously went 1-0 up with the penalty. But I just can't see it on Sunday. I do think he will keep with the 3 in the midfield. And to be fair, you can't take Jones out. I mean, you probably can't anyway because the options are so thin on the ground. But after a performance like that, if you can't keep your place, then it's incredibly harsh. So yeah, Fabinho, Henderson, keeping it solid, and then Jones left to roam, I think.
I suppose the only other option, Theo, would be possibly Naby Keita. He didn't play midweek, but he is back from injury now. But would seem a bit of a risk to throw him in instead of Curtis Jones after what happened on Tuesday.
Yeah, you're not taking out your captain and you're not taking out Fabinho. Curtis Jones is in form, so you let him keep the place. The same as when Harvey Elliott was in form, you let him keep the place. Granted, there was that formation change hints, but if you look at the midfield from that day, Fabinho was out injured, wasn't he? So it was Wijnaldum and Henderson as the 2, and on the bench it would have been Milner and Keita, Jones. So that was a lack of options. Granted, it's a change in defence that even prompted this hint, but when you've got Fabinho there, you play 3, don't you? Like, you trust him to look after it all on his own, and then Henderson and probably Jones are going to be the ones unleashed further forward. With Singer, Curtis Jones can sure hit a ball. It'd be nice if he can pull out Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain-esque strike against City, wouldn't it, in front of the cup?
Yeah, it absolutely would. And I think that the front 3 is an interesting one as well, Gorsty. There's probably one certainty in terms of Mohamed Salah. In terms of the other 2 spots, I'd be tempted to go with Firmino and Jota and maybe take Sadio Mane out. But Mane does, of course, have a pretty decent record against Manchester City.
Yeah, I wouldn't be leaving Mane out. The issue is Firmino and Jota, as it probably is going to be most weeks now, isn't it? Firmino looked sharp when he came on. He obviously took his 2 goals quite well. That would have done wonders for his confidence, I think. So yeah, I think it might be time for Jota to have a little bit of a rest, and if needed, he's in reserve because it's not a bad sub to have if you need an attacker coming on, is it? So yeah, I'll go with Firmino and Mane.
Yeah, Jota probably the most effective off the bench, Theo. Does that play into your thinking, or do you want him from the start in this one?
No, I'd go along with the traditional front 3. For me, Firmino is still first choice. It's just because of injuries, perhaps, and coming back late from the Copa America that he hasn't had his place so far this season. But he looked sharp in pre-season. He was sharp on the opening day against Norwich. Got that injury at the wrong time, but then he's just picked up against Porto. He's good for these sorts of games against City. It's when he comes up to the occasion, isn't it? He loves playing in front of that Anfield crowd with the atmosphere. He's a big man for the big occasions, and it's one where you can trust him to get the job done. And we've had these doubts about his goal-scoring record before, but if he's got, 3 already this season, he's been limited to mainly substitute roles, might suggest he's got that hunger back in front of goal. And with Jota, yeah, he's not been at his best the last couple of games. He probably should have scored in midweek. He was a little bit wasteful, and he's had a couple of games like that. He is does make more of an impact off the bench, and that's been what Liverpool have perhaps lacked against Man City in the past. They've come out the traps flying, they've absolutely stormed it for the first 35 minutes, quieting down going into half-time, but then they haven't had that body to throw on to give it that final kick, that killer punch in the final 20-30 minutes. And that's where Jota could be really useful here. If you've had your traditional front three tiring out the City defence, and then you're throwing him on and knowing, he's going to win any header, because he always finds a way of getting on the end of stuff in the box, and it may give him point to prove as well. We can't take it for granted that he's first choice in this Liverpool team anymore. So yeah, back to the tried and trusted. They've done it against City before, or let them do it again. It's the same as they did against Porto. Granted, they weren't together. All of them scored against Porto, haven't always done it. It'll be the same against City if we're lucky.
Yeah, plenty of decisions to be made then for Jurgen Klopp, and we'll see which one of us, if any of us, has got that team right on Sunday. Just before we go, we'll do our usual match predictions. I'm going to go, I think, for a 2-1 Liverpool win. I do fancy the Anfield crowd to help the Reds over the line, and I'm pretty sure Mohamed Salah will be on the score sheet again. Gorsty, what do you reckon the scoreline might be?
Liverpool have been in great form, haven't they? Scoring loads. 20 goals across September. Yeah, I'll go with the 2-1.
Theo, how do you reckon?
Before we started recording, I was going to say 1-1, but I think you've got me positive now, feeling positive and got confidence in them again. So I think I'd go for a 2-1 as well. But that first goal is going to be huge. That will decide whether it's a game where Liverpool can go and be at their very best, or if it's going to be a nitty-gritty draw.
Yes, pumped up after the podcast. That's what we like to see. We'll have all of the reaction to the game, of course, across the Echo, Liverpool.com and the Blood Red channel. But from myself, Matt Addison, Paul Gorst and Theo Squires, it's goodbye for now.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.